Wherever there are
Viewers who watched last week's Achievers program would have heard the broad outline of how Douglas Orane and his SWAT team at Gracekennedy reorganized the company in such a way that the loss of a large multinational partner, Unilever, turned out as a growth opportunity rather than a challenge. Now, one of the reasons for Douglas Orane's phenomenal success at Gracekennedy, having to succeed the legendary businessman Carlton Alexander, is his abiding faith in bright young people.
You know, ironically, I was clearing out my office over this weekend and I came across a 3-page strategy document I wrote in March of 1986. And one of the things I wrote in there was that Gracekennedy, we need to find a way to get young, bright people, both internally and externally, to come into the company and to have them on call to work on any kind of problem, any kind of issue, any kind of opportunity, so we can move quickly on it. And that's what, in fact, I have done all my career. I have spent a lot of time in making sure we have really good people who, on a moment's notice, can be moved to another area. And that's what we did when the Unilever issue came up. We assembled a team, SWAT team. We kept them solely in one area, and all I did was find a way to develop new products in order to replace the sales and the gross margins and the profits that we were going to lose at the end of that year because of the termination of our contract. And it worked, and now we have done it many times over. The other big one that we succeeded at actually came about 5 years before, and that was the transformation of our manufacturing facilities. We recognized in the early 90s, when the market was opened up from in the late 80s, and then the abolition of exchange control, that in the supermarkets in Jamaica, on the shelves, we had hundreds of competitors from all over the world. So we said, our factories can't continue this way. We were in a protected fishbowl before. Now we're in a big open ocean. So we need to find a way to be world competitive. So what we actually did is we took one factory at a time, and we actually shut it down and retooled it, put in modern machinery, and then reopened in 3 months' time. And what we did was to get a different type of person to run those operations. Basically people who were straight out of high school, who had 4 CXCs, who learned and knew how to work as a team, how to solve their own problems, how to not only operate the machinery, but sweep the floor and do their own quality assurance. And the effect of it was that we actually doubled the productivity of those plants within a year. Now, it has served us so well. I'm going to give you an example. Our meat division plant in Savlamar that makes Vienna sausages and makes frankfurters, that factory now produces 5 times as much volume of sausages and frankfurters as we did in the early 1980s. You would never know driving past, but the productivity has gone up hugely.
Orane mentions with some irony the fact that such success stories don't make the headlines.
Ironically, one of the things that happened, and this is one of the things perhaps we need to learn to manage better in the future, when we closed a factory in the mid-90s, it was on page 1, and it was on the headlines in the electronic media. But when we opened them back 3 months later, it was on page 17. And it probably didn't make the electronic news. So up to now, I still have people coming to me and said, but Gracekennedy is not in manufacturing anymore. But that's absolutely not the case. We actually have more factories today than we had then. We actually have 5 factories now. We had 4 then, because we now have an agro-processing plant in Hounslow and St. Elizabeth for fresh produce, as well as the other 4.
And that's perhaps a vacuum that Gracekennedy still has. Indeed, the media's perception of news is that it's a traditional one, that dog bites man is no news, but man bites dog is news. No, and many companies do not understand how to disseminate good news as well as bad news, and how the strategies you employ to disseminate good news. Some companies feel good about disseminating good news, but how do you disseminate challenging news such as product contamination? How do you do it?
Well, I have found one way of doing it, and that is to be completely honest and upfront from the very beginning on all of these issues. And I'll give you a couple anecdotes in that regard. Product recalls. What we have done is, and we haven't had any product recalls in a long time because we've got a lot better now at the whole quality assurance process. But in the 1980s, it was, in fact, a fairly common occurrence. And what we recognize is best to tell our consumers and have them on our sides and say, we have a recall we are doing, and here are the product codes. And the reason we're doing it is to help protect you, the consumer. And we need your cooperation to help us to recall those products. And people actually like that. They said, this is so good. You're looking out for our interests. This is wonderful. I'm so happy you're doing it. I have more confidence in your products now than I had before. The other one I would share with you as an anecdote is one of the first plants that we actually modernized and transformed was what we call our Gracekennedy division plant, where we, at the time, made the canned juices and also ketchup, and now the Grace Tropical Rhythms is made there. And when we made the decision that there was no other choice but to close it down, retool, restructure, have a different caliber of person working there, we agonized over this one about how we tell our people who are working there, because most of them would either be retired or their posts would be made redundant. Some would come back, yes, which would be good. And we said, you know what, we are confident that we trust them. So we told them 3 months in advance, against the advice of many people who said, you must be crazy. You want them to sabotage your plant and mash up the place? And we said, no, we trust our people. And our colleagues respected that information, and they worked so well, so smoothly, so effectively for that 3 months, right up to the last day before we made the transformation and started the move towards a new factory. So I've learned from that, which is that if we are straight up with people, they respect us for it. And in Jamaica, what do you hear that they cry every day? We want respect. They might diss me. So one of the things we need to learn as leaders is how to show that respect. And one simple way of doing it is to be very transparent and open with information with people.
A veritable tutorial there from one of the Caribbean's finest business minds, Douglas Orane, on the virtues of honesty, integrity, and transparency in building trust. We trust that you found our 3-part feature on Douglas Orane, business leader extraordinaire, helpful and practical.